Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Admiral Markets webinar. My name is Chris, and today we have a special webinar on the British referendum, also called Brexit or Brexit vote, on the EU membership. And we're going to be having a two-part series. In fact, today is the first webinar. Uh, Next week, we have a second part on Tuesday. That should be the 21st, if I remember correctly, of June, and that will be 1 hour later. So we hope to welcome you in the second webinar as well. Before we take a look at today's topic, please be aware that you can use the hashtag AMBrexitFAQ to ask us questions. We would actually prefer if you use that instead of the chat. Of course, chat is fine as well, but if you use this hashtag, we would really appreciate that, and we'll take a look at the questions as you tweet them. All right. With that said, first of all, be aware that trading for exchange and global financial markets is considered high risk, may not be suitable for everyone. Please seek the advice of an independent financial advisor for more information on that. This webinar is not advice and is for informational and educational purposes only. Plus, by continuing watching this webinar, you agree with this disclaimer and you are aware of the risk involved when trading. Also, please be aware that this webinar and later on this video is shown to a global audience, but check this link, admiralmarketsglobal.com, to select your country of residence and contact the appropriate entity to find out if it is suitable for you and other details. All right, so today we are going to discuss Great Britain's choice, remaining in the European Union or leaving the European Union. Today with me, of course, as always, is Nennet. First of all, I want to say hi, and just curious about his thoughts about it. What is his vibe? Is he curious what the results are going to be? Hi, Nennet.
Hi, Chris. Very good question. We're really into this Brexit now, and a lot of people been asking us what we think the outcome will be. Well, to tell you my honest opinion, as I always say, if you ask me like 9 months ago, and I would really say 90-10 in favor of stay, but today I think the chance is 50-50, because we still have a lot of undecided people to actually, we don't know what those undecided will vote for. So from current perspective, we can see that Leave camp is in a slight lead. But in my opinion, I'm still favoring a little bit, I'm favoring stay, a little bit towards stay. So no matter the polls, no matter what latest polls are, I still think that UK will stay in European Union, and maybe there is a slight difference between those decided and undecided. But the thing is that those undecided might prevail, and I think that those undecided are mostly for stay in UK. Although there are pros and cons, a lot of people, I have a lot of friends and traders who actually worked and live in UK, and all of them basically were saying that, most of them were saying that they would probably prefer to leave. But the thing is, I'm not sure that majority of people are actually know why they would like to leave. There are a lot of things on stake here at stake, and we will also deeper explain it in our article. And today we will deal with possible repercussions. But I'm not sure that many people are economically educated to know what could happen if UK actually leaves European Union.
Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of things to discuss, and I think that it's good to mention to everyone that we're looking at it from, we're not British, so we're just looking at it from a neutral point of view. Obviously, it's the British voters that are going to decide. It does have a global European impact that affects, a larger group than only Great Britain. But we're going to try to present everything as neutral as possible. We're not trying to choose sides. There's, a lot of back and forth between the two camps. We're just trying to present to you what's at stake, what are the choices are, etc. Ultimately, the British will be voting next week, Thursday, about this question, and there will be an outcome, and we'll have to see what the outcome is and how close it's going to be. It probably is going to be very close, as the polls are showing. So today we're going to be looking at part one and part two. I'll start with part one, taking a look basically at some British and EU perspectives about staying and leaving from kind of a geopolitical way, in a way, or long-term strategic point of view, more from a security point of view as well, perhaps. Then hang in there for the second part if that does not sound interesting to you, because Ned is going to take a look at some pros and cons from an economic point of view, among others, and also the impact on Forex. Next week, we take a look at the Forex market, financial markets, and also what the traders can expect. So that's next week on Tuesday. All right, so we already talked about it a bit, but there are a lot of arguments, there are a lot of points of views. There's a bit of or distrust, in fact, between the two camps. And I think that part of the reason, obviously, is just each side is trying to influence and impact as many people as possible to sway them into this, going into voting for their side, voting for their camp. And that obviously just creates distrust. There are a lot of points of views, there are a lot of factors to consider. And from that point of view, it's not really easy to predict what could happen maybe even in both cases, right? There are a lot of variables. It is like predicting the weather beyond 7 days. There are just so many things to think about that could be a very complicated thing. It is, however, a crucial and historical decision for the United Kingdom, Europe, and even the world. Now, Nathan is adding that the referendum is not binding the government, but the United Kingdom government setting aside such an outcome maybe is difficult to imagine, unless it's really the difference is maybe literally 10 votes. It's difficult to imagine that they would do that, or it could really seriously damage the British participation, the legitimacy of the British participation. So that could be very difficult. So whether to stay or leave is, from my point of view, a long-term strategic decision. There are a lot of factors that come into people's mind, but I think it's basically whether the UK is ready to accept an independent but smaller role in European affairs and global affairs, or do they prefer basically trying to influence a bigger and more powerful European Union from within? All right, so if we use a circle, right, do they want to be small like this but independent, right? Or do we want to be actually part of a bigger unity, but only be a part of that bigger unity, right? So ultimately, the UK and EU will not be able to avoid cooperation with each other. I mean, they're geographically so close to each other, historically, culturally, but there could, of course, a Brexit could spark potentially, at least that's the state people are saying, and I think that's difficult to twist about it. It could lead to more isolationism in general, more EU exits potentially at least, and therefore EU instability and perhaps EU collapse at the end of the day. All right, that is a potential that could happen. So, in contrast, though, the UK, it could be beneficial for the UK themselves because they, might win over some independence, right, on migration laws, the pound, and then it's going to talk about that later on. However, accessing the EU markets still remains an important aspect for the Brits, and that might be a bit tough negotiating with the EU, right? Britain basically just says, okay, we're leaving. And, oh, by the way, we'd like to negotiate again. And that's not easy negotiating with the EU with the organization that you just left. And well, we'll talk about the pros and cons of that in just a second. But obviously, the EU could be willing to negotiate because they also have benefit from trade with the UK. But they might not want to make it too easy because they don't want to show to others that, hey, it's very easy to exit and make a new deal again. That could be a precedent that could show to other countries like, oh, it's not that bad to leave, and that could be something that the EU might want to stop or not show as an example. All right. Well, anyhow, so let's dive into the geopolitical side. Obviously, the old Europe, a lot of national rivalries and empires and alliances. And well, if you look at history, obviously there was a lot of battles and it was riffled with that. All right. Now, Prime Minister Cameron already suggested that that could lead to turmoil if the Great Britain leaves, and some say that this is exaggerated. Of course, the critics say that's exaggerated, that the danger is not that big, and it was just a persuasion from the Prime Minister to push people into voting to stay. But the question is it really overdone? Are those dangers really exaggerated, or could we expect things to continue as they were, even with a Britain outside of the EU? Now, that question is really difficult to answer, and we don't know the answer to that, in fact. The factors remain unclear. But we do have to realize that there is indeed a chance that it could unleash a chain of reactions that lead to global and European insecurity. That is difficult to ignore and difficult not to say that it could happen. Now, how big of a chance that is, that will depend from person to person and on the factors that you think are important. That is a difficult question. So, yes, it is exclusively a British affair, but it does have potentially negative consequences for Europe, of which we don't know at the moment. But because these reactions can lead to potential grave things, we just don't know. All right. So critics of the EU point out, however, right, that the EU itself has little or no value in maintaining peace in Europe, and they would consider that a bit of a hype. They would counter, right? They would say that the foundations of European security are not built in Brussels, or were not built in Brussels, but in Washington in a way, because it was the US that after the Second World War embraced the Europe and gave security guarantees and financial assistance, aided basically with policy advice to reconstruct Europe. All right, so they would say NATO is the main stability and security, and therefore, hence, a Brexit would not change that equation. So the stay camp would say that NATO and would counter that argument by saying that that is maybe true 50 years ago, but now the NATO and EU are so linked to each other that it's difficult to imagine a stable NATO without a stable EU. All right, so we're really talking about this is ultimately, folks, really a hardcore kind of geopolitical debate here. And there are a lot of other factors that, of course, are important for the Great Britain. But ultimately, the debate, the referendum, if a country is leaving or not, is a significant security, geopolitical choice. And that's why, this is so important. So, if the EU were to basically come to a situation where the Great Britain is gone, it could be weaker because of that. And it depends how much weaker, but if the EU ultimately even collapses, right, then that could seriously even hamper the ability for NATO to respond or act in a way that still is efficient. The other thing that could happen is maybe not EU collapse, but perhaps the opposite, an EU deeper cooperation. A place where basically we're looking at Germany and France taking the lead from a psychological point of view to further enhance the EU. All right, they will maybe take a new initiative for a tighter EU, and the reason is partly psychological. If such a big country leaves the EU, it's kind of a show of weakness. To counter that, right, to counter that momentum and trend, to stop maybe that domino effect, they might want to go deeper and show that there is even a further step that they can do, um, maybe set up new EU corporations or new structures to show that the Brexit will not necessarily stop the EU, to show kind of a new, renewed um, sign of harmony and cooperation. Right? A European worldwide survey conducted by YouGov, all right, that's a British-based opinion pollster, indicated that people around the continent see basically, the key threat to the EU post-Brexit. A majority of the population expect actually that more nations will leave the EU in event of a British exit. All right. So, what could Germany and France do in such a situation? They're faced with a tough choice. It's not easy. And one of the choices they might opt for is, in fact, a deepening of the integration, which could have its own negative advantages, negative disadvantages, right? But they could, for instance, opt for a defense structure. A defense structure, a EU defense organization, however, could be a competition to NATO, right? And if the EU defense organization takes over as the most important role, Great Britain could be left out from that point of view. And there, by coincidence, there is actually a day later, there is a proposal for a tighter EU defense organization already scheduled to be discussed by the EU member states exactly one day later. So if the Brexit happens, they might think about it a bit more seriously. If the Brexit doesn't happen, it might be pushed away, right? So that competition could make things basically difficult for Great Britain. Alrighty. If we continue from, with that in mind, there could be a shift with Brexit. There could be a shift of alliances, and we could be back to basically seeing the old kind of Europe where some countries are showing stronger commitments to others. We of course have certainly the U.S. and Russia that are going to have their impact on global affairs in Europe and European security. Now, from a Russian perspective, an exit from Great Britain and a further European weakness could be seen as a beneficial development. For the U.S., I think that at the moment, of course, depending on presidents, probably, they are not looking favorable at such a development. Well, because what basically could happen is that you could see if the Germany and France are aiming for deeper integration, we could see that some other countries, for instance, Central Europe, with Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and Hungary, trying to stop that. They might not favor a deeper integration. So there could be a rift from that point of view as well. So we might see basically the EU fall into blocks, with the UK hanging basically as an independent entity, maybe the EU splitting in two parts even, right? With some countries even opting out of that, maybe Spain opting out, Finland opting out, but a core of Western European countries still continuing, and a core of Central European countries continuing, and maybe aided by Denmark with the with the Western Europe. So you get blocks of countries that basically are working together. So from a geopolitical point of view, it is natural for Central Europe to seek alignment with the US to counterbalance any pressure from Russia or any pressure from Turkey. And also seek maybe more engagement with the UK. So US, UK, for instance, and Central Europe could be more of an alignment, and the Western Europe there's also a danger for Western Europe that they could be set aside. But you never know how things go after Brexit, how things develop, how the dynamics change. The US might, as what I read with some experts say, that they might favor actually closer cooperation with Germany and France than UK if the UK exits, because they see that Germany and France are more of a cornerstone to European security than Great Britain necessarily. So it all depends. That's why there's a lot of question marks and difficulties with predicting what could happen if a Brexit occurs from a geopolitical point of view. But there is definitely, I think, one could say, pressure on the cohesion, um, because of the reaction that we could expect from the other EU member states, and the tensions that could develop between all those, and perhaps the splits that might occur. All right, so that's definitely something that could happen, and could occur as time progresses. All right, so Britain basically, if they do choose to leave, they have kind of a couple of choices. They could, of course, stay obviously in Great Britain, in the EU. Then they maintain all the existing trade agreements, um, and basically there will be less disruptions for the moment, at least, for the EU cohesion. All right. Now that could still differ because we see a growing anti-EU sentiment throughout Europe, and there could be more referendums, who knows, in the future. But that probably will, at least for the near term, be less active than if, I think, Britain were to leave. Now, if Britain decides to leave, then basically we got a couple of choices here for Britain. One would be basically staying fully independent, like the US. In that case, there would be no trade agreement. Then they would have to pay, if they want to export goods or services, they would have to pay tariffs on that. They would not be binded by all kind of EU regulations, which is one of the core arguments as well of the leave camp, right? But they would see, however, because of those tariffs, less demand for their products, and that could be a big GDP hit. I've heard someone say even 14%. All right, so that is not, from an economical point of view, not so attractive. Great Britain could choose to be part of the European Economic Area, like Norway, for instance. All right, but even Norway actually pays into the EU budget, and they don't have any impact on the voting and the direction. So they pay. They still have to live up to the basically to the bureaucracy of the EU and the regulations, because they're exporting to Europe. So they have to adhere to the standards that the European Union is asking for those exports. So they have access to the markets without tariffs, but they are paying, and they still have to meet those regulations. So I'm not sure if that would really satisfy the leave camp, but it would guarantee them independence, though, but without influence. But they would be able to access the markets without tariffs. They could also opt for a bilateral trade deal like Switzerland, all right? But Switzerland actually in 2014 wanted to export goods, but didn't want the import, basically the freedom of employees, the freedom of movement of people from other EUs. But the EU said either you have freedom of, the entire freedom of capital, including goods and labor, or you have nothing at all. You cannot split that. And Switzerland accepted that. Obviously, you got a pretty good negotiation power if you are a group of 28, and it's difficult to counterbalance that if you're alone. So there is a big negotiation power on the side of EU, and that could be a tricky situation, of course, for UK too. Obviously, EU has a stake as well, because if they lose the access to British market, for them too, that would be painful. But 27 countries versus one, there is a bit of negotiation power, I think, on the EU. Plus, the EU will want to play it tough due to the fact they don't want to show precedent that it is easy to leave and get a good deal after that, right? Because if they make it easy for the UK, other countries might opt to do the same, leave, get a good deal, and that, I think, is not what the EU wants. So there are tricky follow-ups, kind of, if something were to happen like that. It basically the situation is such that obviously the UK could leave, but it is not the world has changed, and the UK is, when however you look at it, close to the European Union, and it is important. Will always be basically an important factor for the UK. They cannot just wish away the EU. It's not going to disappear, at least for the near future. So they're going to have to deal with the reality that the EU will have regulations for their goods and services, and that's just not going to disappear. You know, it's like kind of like for Britain a headache that they might reduce a bit, but they cannot totally get rid of in a way, because UK is just, practically speaking, close, and if they want to still participate with the EU, uh, they're going to have to partly adhere to the wishes of the EU, and that will not change unless they really choose for a full independence, and with the disadvantages of that. So yeah, it's tricky situation, uh, but we will find out what the choice will be. There are other things, of course, that are important. This is basically more focused on security, geopolitics, and how the future chain of events could unfold depending on the choice. Um, I don't think that necessarily the EU is out of, the existence of the EU is necessarily out of a risk-free zone if Great Britain stays. We are seeing, a lot of EU countries, a lot of EU member states, and the populations in those states showing a lot of skepticism towards the bureaucracy of the EU, towards deeper integration, towards basically a widening of the responsibilities that the EU is taking. And that is a tough challenge ahead. And from that point of view, it could be actually, let's say, if Britain just barely stays in the EU, or let's say the referendum is just barely in the favor of staying, it could be the outcome, basically, or let's say the takeaway from that, could be a new lesson for Brussels that this was a very close call to having one of the three largest member states leaving. And maybe this could be used as a catalyst for using a new direction of the EU, for maybe reducing the integration, making the EU move into a different direction in a way. And that will not be easy. I don't think that that's going to happen soon. But that could maybe be the catalyst of a new discussion, not of a deeper integration, but of maybe a reduced integration. Um, there's a difficult discussions, but maybe the UK could take the lead in building a more practical EU that has a, let's say, larger support, a support of a larger part of the European Union, in fact. And maybe the UK could be the best one to lead that direction, if of course they still are in the EU. All right, so all right, it's a tough spot. It's a historical spot. We got other countries like Scotland, Quebec that decided to stay in Canada and stay in Great Britain, ironically. Um, and it's going to be very exciting, I guess, to see how it unfolds. So we're going to dive into other things, of course, now. Nennet is going to take a look at some pros and cons, for instance, from an economical point of view. What impact could it have on the pound from a law perspective, migration, and also forex. And next week, as I said, we're going to dive into more traders' perspectives and market perspective in general. All right, so I'm going to hand it over to Nennet. Let me pass over the presentation here. There we go.
Thank you, Chris. Lovely presentation. So guys, please, for all questions, use hashtag AMBrexitFAQ on Twitter rather than this share, so we can actually invite a lot more people to actively discuss the hottest topic at this point. So as I said, today we will delve a little bit deeper into economics, GBP currency law, and migration. So it's very important to state these four different subjects, because there will be a huge repercussions on every on these if UK sees a Brexit. So first, let's say a little bit about economics, and the thing is that, as you can see, UK is mainly services economy, okay, and 78% of GDP is actually services, okay. And if we watch GDP by sector, we can see that agriculture is 0.6%, construction 6.4%, production 14.6%, services in 2014 is 78.4%, and UK exports is 503 billion. Okay, so UK really is a huge service economy. All manufactured goods, they produce chemicals, food, beverages, tobacco, automotive vehicles and components, computer programming, finance, entertainment, clothes, fuel, oil, petroleum products, industrial supplies and materials, and military arms and equipment. Main export partners, now watch this guys, Germany 10.8, so Germany actually precedes United States. So Germany is the biggest export partner to UK, even better than United States. And other parts of the world, I need to say European Union, include Netherlands 8.1, Switzerland 7.2, France 6.5, Ireland 6.4, and Belgium 4.5. That was statistics for 2014. And actually, what does it tell you? Well, it tells you that really that UK exports heavily to European Union. Now, we have actually two possible scenarios for Brexit. There is Brexit worst case scenario and Brexit best case scenario. Well, let's think that UK will leave, because if UK stays, then more or less it could remain the same as it is of now, and maybe the only change will be renegotiation of terms with European Union. But if they leave, actually the consequence can be twofold. So in a worst case scenario where UK fails to strike a trade deal with the rest of European Union, and it does not reach a free trade agenda, GDP would be 2.2% lower than if UK had remained inside European Union. Well, in a best case scenario, that is why I'm always implying that UK should renegotiate terms with European Union. That is the best case for Brexit, that UK strikes a FTA or free trade agreement with European Union. Well, it will definitely deregulate all of their economy, and it will open up fully to trade with the rest of the world. That will be good for UK, guys, because in these estimations done by Open Europe and Chirac Consulting, the thing is that UK GDP would be 1.6% higher than it would be if it had stayed within the European Union. So estimations, guys, are, as you can see, it really depends. We cannot be white and black here. There should be some shades of gray, because Brexit can definitely have two possible outcomes: worst case outcome, best case outcome. Even if Brexit happens, my personal opinion that UK will get towards best case. I really think that even if they leave, I think that they will strike a new free trade agreement with European Union, and that will be positive for their GDP, because they will open to trade fully with the rest of the world, and that is what the rest of the world wants. They don't want isolated UK, and UK also does not want to be isolated from the rest of the world. So if we see a Brexit, I expect best case scenario, and you see projections are actually until 2030, so basically it's like in the next 15, 16 years. So now when we talk about that most important parts of economics, definitely free trade agreement with European Union is one of priorities. And as we could see in previous slides, European Union is a destination for about half and more of all British goods exports. Okay. Now the trading links are bigger if we include the countries that United Kingdom trades freely with, because they have a free trade agreement with European Union. And as I tweeted 15 minutes, 20 minutes ago, that accounts for 63% of Britain goods exports, because those are linked to European Union membership. Okay. Now, the thing is what they don't like, and of course, I think that majority UK citizens don't like, is actually that if UK remains in European Union, then by 2020, year of 2020, they must adopt euro and drop the GBP. Okay, and additionally, all legislation in UK will need to be in alignment with European Union codes legislation. And for me, it sounds like a rewrite of UK legislation. So guys, you see now, we really need to be neutral here, and we are neutral, of course. We are giving you pros and cons. But the thing is, when I personally think about it, it doesn't look correct that they need to adopt euro and drop the pound. So basically it's legislation, it's a European Union, and all those countries that are still in European Union, and including Croatia, right, and other countries that use their own currency, they need to drop their own currency, use only euro currency. Now on the flip side, if Brexit happens, UK will keep the GBP and legislation, but it will be the risk, it will run the risk of losing population. And I mean those with European passports currently residing in UK. We will talk about it a little bit later. Okay. Now, it is, as I said, really I think that it's my personal opinion. It doesn't mean that I'm right, but you know, I'm using some logic here and common sense. Now, it's highly probable that a favorable trade agreement would be reached after Brexit, and if there is a Brexit, because there are a lot of advantages for both sides in continuing a close commercial arrangement. Okay, but even if it doesn't happen, even if they don't see a most favorable FTA, free trade agreement, it will not be a disaster for UK, definitely. Okay, because guys, benefits of being in European Union are definitely smaller than they were like 10 years ago, right? And 10 years ago, Brexit would had a like bigger impact. So the biggest impacts will be across various sectors. Okay. So in my opinion, Britain could even have a unilateral free trade policy. So non-European Union countries may find negotiation with Britain easier and quicker than dealing with European Union's bureaucracy. Think about Switzerland. Okay, that is a good example on Switzerland, because Switzerland had to deal with European Union's bureaucratic machine. Okay. Also, guys, as you can see, what I also think that UK asset prices may drop, and there could be some additional costs for exporters. As we could see, UK really exports a lot, so exporters should face some additional costs, such as complying with European Union's rules of origin if they were outside the single market. Okay. Additionally, fears that exporters would be let's say, high and dry the day after Brexit or vote are simply unfounded, okay? Because there is so-called Lisbon Treaty. Lisbon Treaty says that country leaving the European Union has 2 years in which to negotiate a withdrawal agreement. So guys, UK, even if Brexit, UK will still have 2 years to renegotiate a withdrawal agreement, okay? So, okay, I really not sure. I'm not sure what impacts on Brexit on trades could be, because for me those are unknown. Okay, a lot of people, analysts and authors, commented that there will be a huge impact on trade. Well, I think that the impact is unknown. It could be big, it could be small. Okay. But we need to think also, we need to watch the whole wood, not just a tree. Because that is possible that leaving European Union would leave external sector better off in the long run. Because Britain could use newfound freedom to negotiate own trading arrangements to good effect. Okay? Also, guys, I doubt there will be a funding deficit. I know that a lot of analysts and commentaries were telling that we could see some funding deficit. I doubt there will be a funding deficit, as currently they pay far more than they get back. It's like 55 million per day, of which only a third is returned to UK. So that also has conditions attached telling UK where they need to spend the money. Okay? Also, additionally, they have a big trade surplus with European Union and sell away more than they actually buy. So it's not Britain that could lose from a Brexit. It may be European Union as the whole. So basically, you see, UK really gives a lot, so really, I'm not sure that there will be some funding deficit. Also, foreign investment, it's very dependable on trade agreements, okay? Access to the single market is not the only reason that companies invest in Britain, okay? Because there are a lot other advantages, okay? Because foreign investments definitely are important to UK, and foreign firms should continue to want a foothold in the country. Okay. Now, I think personally that UK will remain as a haven for foreign direct investment flows, even if they leave. Okay, that is my opinion. Now, of course, additionally, there might be some loss, initial loss of direct foreign investments, but if UK is able to obtain favorable terms on free trade agreements, then foreign direct investment flows would probably make a huge jump after they lost ground initially. Now, for migration, we see that like 100,000 people, it's like annual net migration. So annual net migration from European Union rose to 100,000 people per year, okay? And usually it follows the accession of countries in Eastern Europe, okay? And it's more than doubled since 2012, reaching actually 183K in March 2015. Additionally, workforce is up 0.5% per year, and that is a great thing. because it's very supportive for economy and it keeps interest rates very low. What is important to say that you see that is those are public statistics sourced by Office for National Statistics, Capital Economics, and definitely it's very supportive for economy. Now, what I think about migration, immigration, the thing is that European citizens might suffer some impact. Okay, if they if they do not qualify for British residency or visa requirements, then simply valid European passport will not be enough to live in the UK should there be a Brexit. Okay, there are many citizens, European Union citizens, living and working in UK. So those citizens would not meet current visa requirements for non-European overseas workers if Britain left the bloc. Okay? So that's a lot of people potentially leaving UK. It would make it very difficult for businesses to find workers to replace them. Okay? It will be definitely hard. Now, as for net migration, in the medium term, net migration from European Union countries would almost certainly fall if Britain was outside the single market. And it will reduce the growth rate of British labor force. Okay? That will lead to upward pressure on wages and inflation. It will be benefit to some workers, but it will be detrimental to some employers. Okay? So there will be need for new migration policy. Okay? So as you can see, the things can go twofold. Initially, the things are not very bright in Brexit, but in the midterm, things can turn to be supportive for UK economy. As for law, let's say that they prepare, as I think that basically the last information was that they're actually preparing so-called Brexit budget. And Brexit budget will account for 30 billion GBP worth of cuts and tax raises. Okay, that accounts for 2% on the basic rate, 33% on the high rate, and 5% rise in inheritance tax rates on the middle classes. Okay, there will not be Brussels influence anymore. And I think that UK actually wants that they don't have influence from Brussels, but that means that there should be new laws like new finance bill, and new finance bill should abolish 5% rate on VAT on household energy bills. Okay. Additional, there should be free trade bill to restore the government's power to control its own trade policy, and a bill to repeal the 1972 European Communities Act. Okay? What it means? Repeal of the 1972 European Community Acts will mean that all European treaties will no longer form part of UK law, and the European jurisdiction is over UK. It will come to a definite end. So UK treaties will no longer form part of UK law. So you can see that, if they leave European Union, there will be some new laws, of course. But if they stay in the European Union, as I told you at the beginning of webinar, they should rewrite some laws by the year of 2020. I'm not sure that it goes, because you know that the law is really very strong in UK. Okay, so it's basically I'm not sure, I don't see how they could actually rewrite their legislation to be in a total accordance to European Union policy. So guys, definitely you see there can be a lot of repercussions for both ways, and Now, GBP currency, well, there are a lot of projections. Of course, next webinar will show you how you could actually, if you want to trade after Brexit, we will show you how you might do actually. At least, guys, next webinar will show you what we expect, and I did some extensive analysis on equities, on GBP pairs, so I will show you. But for this webinar, I need to use what banks are telling us, because we simply cannot know what can. I have my own logic, of course, and the simple logic says the immediate impact will be GBP stronger if they stay in European Union, GBP weakening if they leave European Union. But everybody knows that, right? What HSBC thinks is that actually they prefer remain scenario, okay? So their current scenario is that that UK will stay in European Union and rates should rise in November this year, well before the market expects. And they say that if UK stays, there should be 1.60 by year end, okay? If there is no Brexit, GBP might suddenly, immediately spike towards 1.55, okay? So if there is no Brexit, GBP should immediately spike towards 1.55. Additionally, Barclays think that Brexit is good for GBP, okay? And they watch actually Euro GBP reaction, and actually initial reaction on Euro GBP is higher. But then they think that there are clear downside risk in near to mid term. So after initial jump, Euro GBP should drop. What I personally think is that 3650 could be tested on Brexit. I really think that definitely that is very, very possible. And you need to know that 3650 is very, very historical low, and 1.3502 is historical lowest low. But if we watch monthly chart, I will open a monthly chart now. You will definitely see, guys, that actually, let me open monthly chart. Okay, GBP dollar monthly. You will see that we have giant head and shoulders here, guys. Okay, we have giant head and shoulders, and here actually you can see those giant head and shoulders, and this is left, this is head, this is right shoulder, monthly time frame. And by zooming in to monthly time frame, actually, guys, you can see where GBP dollar will probably head immediately if there is a Brexit. See, those are most important lows. Those are historical lows. We see a lot of buyers here, but I think that these buyers, well, at least it should retest to see if those buyers will be strong to push the pair back. But guys, if it doesn't happen, see, we need to print out new levels historically, because if this head and shoulders is broken to the downside, we will see new history writing immediately on GBP dollar chart, and that will be very, very interesting to me from traders' perspective, guys. So from traders' perspective, this is very interesting to me. It's not very interesting to people who actually are will be trading or have some positions open. But for me, for my trading and analyzing perspective, that is a challenge for me, guys. Okay, that is a challenge. Ilya, please use a Brexit handle for Twitter. And definitely that will be the case. If GBP dollar drops heavily, well, you will be able, guys, to go to cheap holidays to London. You know that is economy indeed. that will be much cheaper. But you see, just from trading perspective, I'm very excited. Now, I don't necessarily say that it should print out historical lows, but it definitely, I think that it should test these levels. So let's see what will happen. Next webinar, as I already said, I'm preparing some analysis on equities and on GBP pairs. So it will be definitely interesting to see what we maybe could trade after Brexit, of course. So there will be possibilities to, guys, you know, if you are bold enough, you can get rich overnight, of course. Some people would definitely want to see that. Some people would definitely want to exploit that. So, guys, yeah, excellent. That will be an excellent opportunity for some people to make huge money with low risk, right? I mean, putting a relatively small amount of money in favor of Brexit. But actually, no, it's a form of gambling. You know, it's not trading if you actually want to trade during Brexit. But I'm sure that the impact after a referendum will be huge. So we will either see a big jump or big spike down. And some people will trade it. From my perspective, I will trade it after referendum. Not during, but after. And I am eager to see where the pair will go to. I'm really eager to see that. So guys, this is my 2 cents. Chris already told you what could happen. Any questions, guys, anything what is not clear, or you want to see whatever explanation you need, actually, please use this hashtag on Twitter, and we will be glad to actually respond to every question. Okay? I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. Now we are fully dedicated to Brexit, guys. So pay attention to new updates. Send questions. We are not running away from questions. We actually want to see a lot of questions. We want to help you understand some impacts. We want to see your comments. So please, okay, use this hashtag, and we are always here for you, okay? And actually, after referendum, we will be together watching what happened and what possible trades we could make actually after Brexit. So guys, thank you everyone. Thank you for listening, for comments. We will be here with you soon as always. Cheers. Watch Brexit polls, watch what happens, and as always, trade safe.